Murder of the pizza guy. Okay, so what do we have? Senior Detective Luther entered the room and asked, "I guess he'll be in charge of this from now on. Sir, we know the victim's name is Adam Carl. He was 25 years old and he was just working with the newly opened Yum Pizza store. He was a delivery guy. The day he was murdered, he was returning from a delivery, but unfortunately, he was murdered on his way when the street surveillance camera was already broken. At the moment, there's no strong suspect in our hands. I gave him the file while telling him the basic details of the case. My name is Marcus Neon. I'm a 28-year-old detective in North Carolina. The case we're working on is currently the most complex one because the boy who was murdered lived alone with his little brother. No family connection has been found, so it's harder to find suspects with motives to murder him. His criminal records are clean and he never once got into a fight with anyone. So the case is going to take a little bit more time before getting completely solved. The local police gave our department this case because it's getting the eye of everyone. Medias everywhere are trying to connect this case with several other theories, but in reality, it's not as easy as it looks. I've been pulling all-nighters in a row from the day that I got this case. In this case, it's like a mystery because whoever the culprit is, he thought of every possible move in advance before committing the crime. It's been more than a week since we found the body. There were stab marks on his body, but no weapons were found at the crime scene. The body was immediately sent for autopsy and the results were in just the day before yesterday. According to the results, the cause of his death was strangling by rope and his body was stabbed after he died. Detective Neon, what do you think of this case? You've been working on it from the start, right? After reading the file carefully, Senior Detective Luther turned his head towards me and asked, I've concluded that the culprit planned all of this, which means that the pizza delivery must also have been included in this. So the culprit can be someone who's already working in the pizza place, or it must be someone who's one of his regulars. It's either a grudge or jealousy. These were the only possibilities I'd come up with yet. Don't you think it's related to love? Did he not have a girlfriend? He asked in a calm tone, as if he was trying to process and deduct the possibilities of the murder. Yes, Portia Nina was the name of his girlfriend. She was a fellow worker in the store. She got another job offer, so she resigned. But I don't think she's related to his murder in any possible way. They broke up about a month ago before his death, and they were on pretty good terms even after the breakup. I picked up another file that had all this information while telling him this. What about her now? Is she seeing someone? He took the file from my hand and asked while keeping his focus on the file. No, she denied being involved with someone during the questioning. He looked up as I said that. And you believe that? How long has it been since you started working as a detective, Mr. Neon? 2 years, sir. I hesitated at his question at first, but then responded in a loud, respectful tone. Detective Neon, by this time, you may have realized that we don't believe anything until we have proof. Now put someone on the trail of Miss Nina. I think she's somehow related to this murder. He exited the room after saying that, and his suspicion of Nina made me confused. I picked up my phone and gave a call to Anthony, asking him to trail Nina's every move. After that, I picked up the file again and started going through it. According to Adam's coworkers, he came to work on time as usual. He went for his first delivery at around 10:15 a.m. and he returned on time. His day was pretty much normal. He delivered pizza and looked happy when he received a nice amount of tips. At around 6:38 p.m., he went on his last delivery, just before he was murdered. The customer was one of the regulars. She normally used to put on a special request and ask for Marcus to deliver her pizza. At first, she was on my suspect list, but after questioning her, I removed her from that. She was just a single mother of newly born twins, so I don't think she had the motive or energy for the crime. As I was reading the file, to find another clue, I received a call from Anthony. Sir, I was tailing Nina. I saw her with a man. They looked like they were arguing. What Anthony was saying shocked me because Nina told me that she was not involved with any men. I think the senior must be right about Nina's involvement in the crime. You took pictures, right? I asked Anthony. Yes, sir. Sharing them right away. As he said that, a notification bell rang and I received the pictures. Checked the database for the man to see if he had any past criminal records, and I got it. His name was Carl Harris, and he was previously a suspect in the murder of a middle-aged man 2 years ago. At the time, he was involved with his wife, but soon after his suspicion, the wife also committed suicide. She had written a suicide note that matched her handwriting in which she confessed to murdering her husband because he was abusive towards her. That case was closed after that, and Carl was removed from being a suspect. He was also in for harassing women multiple times. I called Nina in for questioning and started to ask her questions related to Carl. Her expressions were surprisingly calm, as if she knew this was coming. "Were you involved in Adam's murder along with Carl?" I asked her. "No, I've told you multiple times that I'm not involved in his murder," she said in an annoyed tone. "Okay, maybe you're not, but you're not denying Carl's involved either. Nina, do you know something?" As the senior said that, I could notice the nervousness on Nina's face, as if she wanted to hide something. "You know, we have enough proof to put you in for murder of Adam if you try to hide something. Either this, or you'll end up committing suicide like the previous woman Clara framed." I only said this to scare Nina, and it worked. She started to cry. She told us that Carl suddenly showed up out of nowhere and started to harass her, saying he wanted to date her. But when she rejected him, saying that she was still in love with Adam, just to get him off her back, he disappeared for a week. Nina thought he finally backed down, but one day, she suddenly got the news that Adam was murdered. Carl came back the day after Adam's murder and continued to harass her. She told us that she only suspected that Carl killed Adam, but she never got any proof that Carl ever said anything about it. We dispatched a team to bring Carl in for questioning, and another team was dispatched to search Carl's apartment and car for evidence. The rope and the knife were found in his bedroom closet, and it was sent into the forensics lab. While questioning Carl, he was silent the entire time and did not tell us anything. The senior detective got a warrant to put him in under arrest because he was convinced that Carl is the culprit. A week later, the forensics results were in, and Adam's DNA along with Carl's fingerprints were found on the weapons. After that, he was officially arrested for killing Adam, but he still hasn't revealed how he killed him, or even what happened on the day when Adam was returning after his last delivery. One thing is for sure, my respect for Senior Detective Luther has increased because he was right all along, and I guess I'm going to reopen the case of that middle-aged man because I don't think his wife killed him, or that the wife committed suicide either.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all this support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so. Where's your mom, Gracie? I turned toward Father and looked at him with a disgusted look when he asked me this. She's not my mom, she's just your girlfriend. He wasn't surprised by my response because he knew I never liked Carla. She will soon be, because I'm going to ask her to marry me today. He pulled out a ring and said with a cringe-worthy smile. I walked out of the room because I did not want to argue with my father over that cheap woman. Father started dating this girl just after 4 years of my mother's death. It was like she had put some spell over him because he was head over heels with her. She was absolutely disgusting, and I hated her. Only I knew what she really was behind that nice face of hers, but I could never tell him that because I know he would never believe me even if I did, so it was no use to even think about it. It was my mother's anniversary the next day, and I was getting ready when she walked into my room with a big nasty smile on her face. Trust me, every time I see her, I feel like I should kill her right away. I have imagined different methods of killing her, but I won't do it because Father liked her. Black suits you, dear. She came closer and caressed my cheek with the back of her hand. I immediately jumped away from her and shouted, "Don't touch me." She smirked by my response. "Why do you hate me, Grace? You know how much I love you, right?" She said with the same creepy and cringe smile. "Yes, Gracie, don't be so hard on your mom." Father walked in my room and said while kissing her, "Do any of you know how to knock?" I got frustrated by their public display of affection. I was ready to walk out of my room in frustration when Dad said there was something important he wanted to talk about. This year, Carla will be attending the ceremony as well. I turned my head in a jolt towards them. "Why? You are talking about the ceremony of Mom's anniversary, right? So why must your mistress attend it?" I said while gritting my teeth. But Father looked annoyed by what I said, and he started to scream at me that I should mind my manners and Carla is not his mistress, etc. I simply walked out of the room. I went directly to my mom's room. I locked it from inside just to be careful and started crying while sitting on her bed. There was a huge painting of Mom in the room. I was the one that made that for her birthday the year before she died. I started to bawl my eyes out because I was feeling so helpless at the moment that I could do nothing else except for cry. I remember the day Carla first came in our lives. I wasn't that much against her because I had seen my father being devastated by my mother's death for those past 4 years, and with Carla, he used to smile a little. I still did not like the fact that she is here to replace my mom, but I was ready to endure her for father's sake. But one day when I was sleeping, I felt someone touching me. I jolted awake, but Carla covered my mouth with her hands. "There was some dirt over you. I was just trying to clean it." She showed me her hands with a weird smile on her face. "What are you doing in my room in the first place?" I asked her. "Well, come on, isn't a mother allowed to see her future daughter?" And I did not like this response of her, and she was still smiling with that cringe-worthy smile. The touching started to get increasingly obvious. She would sometimes come inside my room when I was changing and would compliment my naked body. Sometimes she would get into the shower when I was already in there. Coming into my room without knocking became a habit of hers. I started to feel insecure and weird. At first, I thought it was just in my mind, but slowly, the things she did started to become transparent, as if she wanted me to know what she was up to. But obviously my father was so oblivious that he thought that she touching me is something she is doing to prove that she is worthy of being my mother, and that's what mothers do. Well, my mom did those things like cleaning me, brushing my hair, kissing my cheek, and it did not feel weird. There was motherly feeling behind it, but when Carla does these things, it definitely feels that she has ulterior motives. The other day, she barged in my room and borrowed my panties, saying she needs it, but she never returned those after that. Instead, she gave me a new set of red laced lingerie. I never wore them, nor am I going to wear them in the future. These things are nothing compared to what she does when she barged into my room in the middle of the night. I swear that I hate her so much that I am literally going to kill her unless I start to like her magically, which, by the way, is never going to happen. After crying my heart out, I went to the washroom and washed my face properly. I came out of the room and went to the hall where the ceremony was taking place. My blood was boiling watching Carla greeting guests like she was the woman of the house. During the entire event, I just tried to hide myself as much as possible from the prying eyes. After the event ended, Father came to me and said, "Listen, Gracie, I just got an urgent call from work, so I need to go on a 2-day business trip this evening. It's important, so try to get along with Carla and not to upset her in any way." He was looking at me with a serious and concerned look. I nodded, and he left. That night, I was suddenly awake in the middle of the night by the sensation of someone's tongue in my mouth. I tried to get up, but noticed my hands and legs were tied to each corner of the bed. "I don't want to be your mom, Grace. You know, I never want to marry your father, but I have to if I can come closer to you that way," she said and started kissing me again. "You are so sexy. I love you, Grace," she moaned in my ears while slipping her hand inside my pants.
On 620 South Main Street of Los Angeles, California, sits a rather unassuming-looking hotel. Opened on December 20th of 1924, the 19-story 700-room hotel had recently undergone something of a makeover. It's now known as the Stay on Main and has been undergoing renovations for the last few years and is due to open again in October of 2021. But whether or not the hotel will see many bookings is anyone's guess, as the place has, shall we say, a rather dark past. You see, for almost 100 years, the Stay on Main was known as the Cecil Hotel, and it's most famous for being the site of an inordinate number of murders, people taking their own lives, and otherwise unexplainable deaths. In the early 1920s, American hoteliers William Hanner, Charles Dix, and Robert Shops pulled together their capital and opened the Cecil as ideal accommodation for travelers and tourists alike. Designed and constructed in the Beaux Art style, the hotel boasted an opulent marble lobby with stained glass windows, potted palms and alabaster statuary. Each of the hoteliers brought a vast amount of business acumen to the table, and it seemed the Cecil was destined to be a roaring success. But within 5 years of its grand opening, America would plunge into financial ruin, as Wall Street would bring one of the darkest days in U.S. stock market history. It's little surprise that this tumultuous event is the thing that seems to have preceded such a morbid decline, but even for such a depressing period of history, the Cecil seems to have been the center of some kind of grim maelstrom, as the deaths came thick and fast from then on. In November of 1931, 46-year-old W.K. Norton took his own life by ingesting poison. A week prior, he had checked into the Cecil under the guise of a man named James Willies from Chicago. It's not certain why Norton took his own life, but it's been commonly speculated that it was related to the financial crisis of the previous 2 years. Less than a year later, in September of 1932, 25-year-old Benjamin Doddich shot himself in the head while sitting on a Cecil hotel bed. A maid found his body the following morning, but again, it's not clear why the young man decided to take his own life, as he neglected to leave a note. In late July of 1934, former Army Medical Corps Sergeant Louis D. Borden checked into a room at the Cecil, only to slash his own throat with a straight razor in the hotel bathroom. Yet unlike the previous two, the 53-year-old left several notes, one of which cited poor health as the reason for his actions. A tragic yet perfectly understandable reason to take your own life, but just as terrifying and bizarre was that he too should gravitate to the Cecil in the final hours of his life. In the decade that followed, many more of these unexplained deaths would occur, around a third of them involving military men. But the nature of the deaths at the Cecil would not evolve until September of 1944, when a young woman named Dorothy Jean Purcell seemed to be overcome with a temporary but terrible madness. Dorothy had booked a stay at the Cecil with her 38-year-old boyfriend, Ben Levine. All was well until the middle of the night when Dorothy awoke in terrible pain. She soon realized that what she was experiencing was contractions and that she was going into labor. Terrified and confused, she dragged herself into the hotel bathroom, quietly giving birth to a tiny baby boy. Dorothy later claimed that she had no idea she was even pregnant, and as such, she'd done absolutely no research into what to expect. According to her, the baby was silent as the grave, leading her to believe that it was some kind of stillbirth. Yet, instead of waking her boyfriend or calling for help, Dorothy Purcell opened up the bathroom window as quietly as she could, then tossed her infant son out into the night. The deceased child was later found on the roof of an adjacent building, yet it was determined that the child had still been alive at the time it had been thrown from the hotel window. Naturally, there was a palpable level of public outrage once the story graced local newspapers, and Dorothy Purcell was tracked down and arrested on suspicion of murder. However, after being psychoanalyzed by not one but 3 psychiatrists, Dorothy was determined to be mentally confused at the time of the birth and was acquitted in January of 1945 by reason of insanity. By all accounts, she'd had no history of mental health problems prior to checking into the Cecil and had absolutely no explanation for the event itself. It seems like a horrible coincidence that such a thing would occur while staying at the Cecil Hotel, but the question remains, were there other forces at work which induced both Dorothy's labor and the so-called confused state that followed? Between 1944 and 1962, a handful of other people took their own lives at the Cecil Hotel, all of them involving death by falling. One of these was particularly gruesome, given that it didn't just take one life, but 2. On October 12th of 1962, 27-year-old Pauline Otten jumped from the window of her 9th floor room after an argument with her estranged husband, Dewey, who had stormed out of the suite just moments before. In a sickening twist of fate, Pauline landed on a passing pedestrian, 65-year-old George Giannini, with the impact killing them both instantly. As there were no witnesses, police initially believed that Pauline and George had taken their life together, possibly as some kind of bizarre death pact. However, it was soon determined that not only was Giannini wearing shoes at the time of his death, he also had his hands in his pockets. Had he jumped, his shoes would have likely fallen off during the fall or upon impact, and his hands would have definitely not have remained in his pockets. It's quite incredible that such an unfortunate event could even occur. There was literally not another soul on the street that day, and Pauline just so happened to land perfectly atop her unlikely victim. Again, is this purely coincidence, or was there something else at work that day? The next bizarre death to occur at the Cecil was that of 65-year-old retired telephone operator Goldie Osgood. Osgood was well known around the area and had earned the nickname of Pigeon Goldie because she fed birds in nearby Pershing Square. She was a regular sight around the square, perennially sporting the LA Dodgers baseball that she seemed to cherish so dearly. But on June 4th of 1964, a member of the Cecil's housekeeping staff entered Goldie's room to find the place had been ransacked. Birdseed was scattered all over the room, something Goldie carried around everywhere with her, and her beloved LA Dodgers cap was lying in a pool of blood just feet away from her lifeless corpse. She had been beaten, carnally violated, and then stabbed almost 30 times with a large serrated knife. Just hours after her murder, 29-year-old Jacques Ellinger was spotted walking through Pershing Square with his clothes absolutely soaked in blood. This is at a time when DNA analysis hadn't been invented yet, but since there was a literal trail of blood from Goldie's hotel room to Pershing Square, it was pretty easy to deduce that Jacques had been Goldie's killer. But this is where things get weird. Despite the killing being connected to a handful of other murders in the area, Jacques claimed that he had no memory of any murder and had in fact blacked out for a few hours, led to police dropping all charges against him. What should have been an open and shut case was muddied and crippled by some mysterious internal or external influence, and once again, the Cecil Hotel was inextricably involved somehow. Two more mysterious deaths by falling occurred at the Cecil in the years 1975 and 1992. But perhaps the most famous of all the Cecil's enigmatic deaths is that of 21-year-old Canadian college student Elisa Lam. Enrolled at the University of British Columbia, Elisa decided to do a post-Christmas trip down to California in early 2013. She traveled solo via Amtrak and inner-city buses, taking time out to visit the San Diego Zoo and eventually arriving safely in LA on January 26th. 2 days later, she checked into the Cecil Hotel, opting for one of the hotel's cheaper shared rooms on its 5th floor. However, just a day or two into her stay, her impromptu roommates began to complain that Elisa was exhibiting some rather off behavior. As a result, hotel staff decided to move Elisa into her own private room at no extra cost. It's worth noting at this stage that Elisa had been previously diagnosed with both depression and bipolar disorder and was taking 4 separate medications to combat the symptoms. However, not a single member of her family said that she had any history whatsoever of any thoughts of taking her own life. According to them, Elisa had her own struggles, but she determined to conquer adversity and lead a happy, productive life. Yet they did admit to one incident in which Elisa had gone missing for a brief period of time. Naturally, her parents were mildly concerned about her well-being during a solo trip down to Cali and asked Elisa to check in with them every day she was there. Elisa was only too happy to comply and called daily to share travel stories and swap I love yous. However, on February 1st of 2013, the very same day she was due to check out of the Cecil, her daily phone call didn't come. Elisa's parents grew increasingly worried until eventually they contacted the LAPD to report Elisa missing. Police jumped into action, driving down to the Cecil to question hotel staff. A number of the housekeeping team had seen Elisa on the day she disappeared, reporting that she was alone and that nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Police also spoke to the manager of a nearby bookstore that Elisa frequented during her stay, who told them Elisa was outgoing, lively, and very friendly, talking about what books she was getting and whether or not what she was getting would be too heavy for her to carry around as she traveled. In short, it's clear that Elisa was suffering from poor mental health, at least during the morning anyway. As a follow-up, police searched the Cecil and the surrounding area as best they could, using sniffer dogs and helicopter support. But given that no foul play was suspected, the LAPD was unable to search the entire hotel, leaving one detective with the terrible feeling that they were just inches away from finding a girl that was in grave and mortal danger. On February 6th of 2013, a week after she was last spotted, the LAPD circulated flyers with Elisa's image and brought the case to the public's attention through local media outlets. Just over a week later, having still made no progress in the case, LAPD released footage of Lamb's last known sighting, taken from an elevator surveillance camera on February 1st. The roughly 3-minute video shows a solitary Elisa making unusual movements and gestures while appearing to hide in the elevator. It also appears as if Elisa was trying to get the elevator car to move in order to escape from someone who was pursuing her. Some speculated that the bout of paranoia may have been the result of her ingesting some kind of party drug, such as MDMA, while others suggest her behavior was that of a textbook psychotic episode. Yet perhaps the most disturbing suggestion was from a self-proclaimed video editing expert who asserted that the CCTV footage had been tampered with before being released to the general public. Besides the obvious obscuring of the timestamp, this expert claimed that not only had parts of the footage been deliberately slowed down, but almost an entire 60 seconds of the footage had been erased. If this is true, it's fairly obvious why this might be done, and that's to protect the identity of someone who happened to appear in the video. Yet at the same time, could it be to protect the person responsible for Elisa's disappearance? 19 days after Elisa initially went missing, guests at the Cecil Hotel began to complain of low water pressure in their faucets and showers. This was on top of existing complaints that there was a weird taste and color to the tap water. So in the morning of February 19th, a hotel maintenance worker took the stairs up to the hotel's roof, intending to inspect the 4,000-gallon tanks that supplied the hotel's water. 3 of the 4 tanks were completely clear of any debris or blockages, but upon opening the 4th, the maintenance worker let out a blood-curdling scream as he was faced with the bloated, decomposing body of none other than Elisa Lamb. 2 days later, the LA coroner's office released a statement saying that the cause of Elisa's death was accidental drowning, adding that her bipolar disorder played a significant factor in her untimely demise. Although the clothes she'd been wearing in the elevator CCTV footage were found in the tank with her, she had apparently been stripped naked at some point, with a sand-like substance covering the parts of her body that weren't submerged in the water. This sand-like substance was never identified, and there remains intense speculation as to what it might have been. Analysis of Elisa's body showed that there was no evidence of physical trauma, carnal assault, or her taking her own life. Toxicology tests showed traces of the prescription medication she was using, along with a very small amount of alcohol, but no traces of other recreational drugs could be found in her bloodstream. The amount of prescription medication was found to be slightly less than the effective dose, yet experts believe this wasn't low enough to spark off any kind of psychotic episode and dismiss this as being to blame for Elisa's death. All of these details certainly make for an intensely morbid mystery. Perhaps one of the most confounding aspects of the case is just how Elisa got into the water tank in the first place. You see, most of the doors and staircases that led to the hotel's roof were supposedly locked at the time the young Canadian disappeared, and only members of staff have the passcodes and keys to these passages. Any attempt to force them would have triggered an alarm at the hotel front desk, maybe even hotel-wide fire alarm if any of the entrances were fire doors. Surely it's entirely possible that the hotel's fire escape would allow her to reach the roof unimpeded, but sniffer dogs only followed her scent about halfway up the staircase, then indicated that she must have used an open window to scramble onto the roof instead of the door, which was just feet away. On top of that, all 4 tanks were 4 by 8 foot cylinders propped up on concrete blocks, meaning there was no fixed access to them and hotel workers had to use a ladder to get a look at the water. Each was protected by heavy steel lids that would be extremely difficult to properly replace from within. Essentially, all of this pointed to the idea that someone, or something, had somehow killed Elisa and disposed of her body in the water tank, all without being detected by any of the hotel's security cameras. Of all the mysterious deaths that occurred at the Cecil Hotel, Elisa's gives us the most detailed and intimate look into what kind of fate might have befallen them. It's clear that over the years many of the hotel guests had suffered psychotic episodes or blackouts during their stays, and at a rate far higher than any other hotel in the country. And in spite of the fact that these deaths have been occurring for almost 100 years, we're still no closer to offering up concrete explanations for their untimely demises. Perhaps all of the murders, people taking their own life, and enigmatic deaths have perfectly reasonable and logical explanations to them. Explanations that modern science would quite easily have explained. But perhaps there's something more sinister at work here, that the truth behind the Cecil is more akin to Stephen King's The Shining than we'd ever be comfortable admitting to ourselves.